before.
Yeah, this is a fun one with Substack. So welcome everybody. I'm here with Katie Melchior. She is a senior social and brand strategist and the founder of The Strategy Seller. And I'm really excited to have her on telling stories today because she has done some incredible work on social media. I loved her account, French Wine Tutor. I think that the work that she's doing on that is great. She is entrepreneurial with The Strategy Seller, so she is out on her own now. So to see her taking on clients and really helping them transform their social media and their business it's really awesome. And I just know that she has so much to share. And I think we could all benefit from social media. Like no matter how you feel about it, I think that we all want to get better at it, or at least learn to get our presence out there in a way that feels really meaningful. And I think that Katie has lots of really great insights that she can share about that. So, but I think maybe Katie, why don't you give us a little bit about your background and tell us a little bit about like your social media presence?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Shana, for having me. As you said, I'm the founder of my own little agency that I'm calling The Strategy Seller. But prior to that, I've spent the last 10 years or so working in some of New York City's top PR and marketing agencies, really honing in on social media and influencer and content creation strategy for a wide variety of clients, from food, wine, spirits, other beverages like coffee, tourism boards, all that kind of stuff. And prior to that, I was actually working in DC, where I was in the nonprofit world. So I really have had the gamut of working for both consumer brands and nonprofit and corporate. I even worked on Deloitte for a little while. So I've kind of done it all. And, while I was plunging myself really into the food, wine, and spirits side of things when I first moved to New York, that's when I decided to launch French Wine Tutor. And so the two have kind of gone hand in hand. And I just figured earlier this summer was a good time for me to really go out on my own, and the stars kind of aligned. And it's been really fun so far, being able to collaborate with folks that I've admired for so long and work with brands, not just on the French Wine Tutor side, but also brands that I choose for my agency on the Strategy Seller side. So yeah.
And because we're so wine focused, I want to hear a little bit about just how you got into wine really briefly.
Yeah. So I often say that I didn't get into wine first. I got into wine because I spoke French. So when I wanted to, my whole professional goal was to use French in my professional life. That was everything I wanted out of my career. And the best way to do that ended up being, going to a grad school program that I never actually finished, but I got an internship as part of that in Paris, working for a French PR agency. And they were a bit more generalized. They were events focused and did a lot of, social media community management. And at the end of that internship, they didn't have a place for me to stay full-time in Paris, but they had a sister agency in New York City that was focused 100% on food, wine, and spirits. And they only had wine brands at the time that I joined. And so they asked, would you be interested? And have you ever worked in wine before? And I was like, no, I don't. But I was, 26 and excited. And so I was like, I'm just going to do this. And I plunged myself right in. And that first month to 2 months, I had to write I think it was 12 content calendars for every individual French wine region that there ever was. And I was like, half of these promotional materials are in French and half are in English. And what am I doing? And all of this stuff. So that's really how I found wine. It was because I wanted to use the French language. And so wine really found me.
That's incredible. I love that connection right there.
I know.
And tell me a little bit about French Wine Tutor for those that haven't seen that account, because I think that does kind of lay the groundwork for a lot of what you do, or at least what you were doing.
Definitely. So French Wine Tutor is mostly an Instagram page right now, although I'm also obviously here on Substack, as well as I have a blog and a couple of other auxiliary channels, YouTube and Threads predominantly. But really, I started French Wine Tutor because I wanted to help other Americans who didn't speak French but worked in the wine industry learn how to pronounce French wine words, and with a particular focus on folks in the trade and sommelier, because they're the ones who are really pronouncing them every day. So that was really the original, ethos for the creation of the page. And it just kind of caught on, and people really enjoyed the way that I was breaking things down. And so I just never stopped. So if you follow me on French Wine Tutor, you'll see now it's kind of expanded to be a bit more of a lifestyle page as well, but I still have quite a lot of pronunciation content. So if you've ever wondered how to pronounce the big champagne brands or, some of the major regions and appellations and all of that kind of thing, you can find that there on French Wine Tutor. So yeah.
That's awesome. So, so I think one thing is, I think with the personal brand, I kind of want to start here just because we're talking about French Wine Tutor. But tell me a little bit about building that brand. Like, what did you do when you first started? And like, what would you do or not do today that you did back then?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's crazy is, and I'm sure you've seen this too, is how much social media has evolved. Even since I started French Wine Tutor, even since before then, when I started my career really in social media strategy and all of that good stuff, it's changed a lot. So I might not be doing the same things now that I was doing back then, but I think a few things have really remained consistent. And the first thing was that I treated French Wine Tutor as though it was a professional brand from day one. So I didn't really, some people are like, oh, I just have this Instagram and I, post all these things, and that might work for them. But for me, the thing that really kept me organized and going through it was pretending that French Wine Tutor was not just me, but also a client of mine. And so I created a structure and an infrastructure of like the way I create content calendars, the content process flows that I do. I do a little analytics report at the end of every month for myself to kind of
Oh,
show
really?
myself
That's
how things
interesting.
perform. Yeah. And because I, work in social full time, I know how all these things are supposed to be. And so it's like, why wouldn't I, apply that to myself? But I think a lot of people, maybe are just like, oh, I'll just, test this and try this and do that. But I really wanted to professionalize it from day one. So I made sure I had like very clear branding, colors, templates, all of that kind of stuff, really to ensure that when people see
Okay.
my page, they understand immediately what I'm doing, who I am, and they can recognize the fonts and the colors and all of that stuff that I'm using. Not to say that I don't evolve that or change that with time or that I've not gone through any rebrands, but generally speaking, I would say all of that has really maintained the same. And I think one of the other things that's a differentiator for me as a kind of a personal standalone brand as well is making sure that you find a niche. French Wine Tutor works, I
Mm.
think, because I'm the only one that is 100% devoted to French wine only, and also that I have the language side of things. So I'm not, someone who reviews all wines or someone who really has a very broad focus. I have this niche that is both good and bad, but on the one side, people are like, oh, I can follow this person because she's going to teach me specifically about French wine and the French language and pronunciation. On the other side, it means that I don't get as many branding opportunities because I'm not as general, and so I don't get as many brand partnerships, for example, as like larger wine influencers might because they're more general. Or, I might not be able to grow as fast because fewer people are interested in French wine than they are in wine generally. So it definitely comes with both good and the bad. But I would say like the thing that I credit the most with my consistency and my growth for the brand is that said kind of niche approach and expertise. And then also making sure that I'm organized like a business on the back end.
I don't even know if I should start here or save this for later, but I think that this idea of being a specialist versus a generalist is really interesting. So, what would you say are the advantages versus disadvantages towards this sort of approach? I mean, I know you kind of said branding opportunities, but what else? I mean, there's a lot of lifestyle people out there. So, like, what is that? And they're kind of like everything. How does
Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand? Yeah.
Yeah, it's really challenging in the space. It's a moving target. Sometimes there's times where, there's a lot of French wine brands that are like, we don't want to work with a French wine influencer. We don't want to work with a wine influencer in general because we don't think that that reaches, consumers, which couldn't be farther from the truth. But that's a whole separate conversation. I can't convince every brand to do everything all at once. Everyone has limited budget and all of that. And then there's other brands that are like generalized, like French fashion brands who have worked with me before and reached out to me because they're like, well, you're reaching wine lovers, but your page is also kind of has a bit of a lifestyle aspect to it that's like French and
Okay.
Francophone in general. And so that's interesting. So I would say the biggest thing is that aspect that's kind of like a win or lose situation where it depends on who's in charge, and then they kind of decide we're interested in this or we're not. And it really is a bit of a moving target, because I think other people who are maybe larger and more broad in their approach can be a full-time influencer or content creator, quote unquote, because they can take almost any brand deal that comes across their desk. Whereas me, I kind of have to be very specific. I wouldn't do a brand partnership with like a brand from Napa, for example. I have been asked in the past, which is funny, but it's just not part of what I would do. And so I think it's like you have to like really believe in your project and stay true to yourself, because, you know, it can easily become something else. And if that's where you want to go, that's where you want to go. But if you want to really stay and own your niche, then it's important to have that level of authenticity. So
interesting. I noticed that you use the word influencer more than using content creator. Is there a difference between the two? I know that some people don't love the word influencer. Tell me a little bit about terminology.
I know. Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say a content creator is someone who is really able to generate content, not just for their own brand, but for corporate brands as well. An influencer is someone who has a significant following and is able to influence purchase decisions. These two words are not mutually exclusive. So I do also consider myself to be a content creator in addition to being an influencer. But I also know that I'm not a professional photographer, you know, and there are some content creators who really are, and that's the part of their business is being a professional photographer and providing that for brands. So it's really like, but I've also worked with influencers on the corporate side of things who really aren't content creators, and they hire photographers every time they need to do a post for a brand, or when they're asked to do more of this organic off the cuff content, like let's say there's an event or something like that. The content that they create is not to brand acceptable standards. It's blurry, or there's no clear point of view or messaging structure. And so they have to hire someone to come with them to that event to really, you know, show it for them. And I find that a lot more in the celebrity space, particularly because if you're an actor or you're an artist or something, and you just happen to show up on social media and people follow you because you have sort of this awareness outside of social media, then social media is not, content creation is not going to be the thing that you're known for or really good at, but people are going to like it anyway because they know you and you're recognizable. So it's an interesting, like, two-pronged thing, because I will say there are content creators who are also influencers and influencers who are content creators. But sometimes there's people who have maybe 500 followers or less. They're really, really small, but they're amazing at creating content for brands. And so they would potentially be like a user-generated content creator, or someone that a brand would hire to take video content or to take photo content at an event, but they don't consider themselves an influencer. So yeah.
Super interesting. I definitely want to get back to this later, because I definitely want to talk a little bit about some of the nuts and bolts, but I think that's a really interesting distinction that I have not heard before.
Yeah, and all this language is new, right? So it's kind of like there's no legislation really that says an influencer is X or a content creator is X, or, you know, it's kind of the wild, wild west still, which is kind of crazy because it's been like that my whole career. And you would think that 10 years in, we would have like specific definitions for these things, but we really don't. It's still quite fluid and evolving. So yeah.
Sure. And it's also like, well, what platform makes you a content creator or makes you an influencer? Like, I'm creating content when I'm writing articles and stories, and when we're doing these Substack lives. So in theory, I guess I'm a content creator, but that's not my first point of identification, but yet that's what I'm churning out on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting. Yeah. I don't know, but
for sure.
It's just you're right. It's an evolving conversation. It's an evolving dialogue and language that we're creating kind of as we're going.
Yeah. And there's a whole other part of marketing that is content marketing. And that side of things is technically website. It's technically blog. It's technically, what you're saying is it's more written than it is visual. And so that's confusing too, because a lot of people will apply to jobs like that. They're like, oh, I'm a content marketer, but they're actually a social media marketer. So even within the industry, there's like a disagreement on what is what. So doing well.
Let's talk a little bit about this idea of relationships. For like, coming from a brand side, what is this? Talk to me about the importance of creating relationships with influencers, with content creators. Like, tell me about how to maintain these, how to do some outreach. Like, what are some really best practices when you want to create this? And tell me about relationships too, I guess, starting from there.
Yes, absolutely. I think that brands of all sizes recognize the importance of working with, at this point, both traditional press and quote unquote traditional writers like yourself, which I hate to say that because you're not a traditional writer. You have the Substack, you do these lives. Like there's not a lot of other traditional writers that fall into this space, right? But I will
Right.
say, I think that brands are starting to recognize the importance of having a strategy that reaches both journalists and influencers. However, I think that a lot of times brands discount working with influencers because they think immediately that they're going to need to be paid or that they're going to need a lot of money to be paid. And the reality is that an influencer campaign is like dating. You can't just go to a first date and expect somebody to, buy the entire dinner and not buy your dinner completely and then immediately follow up and want to take you to dinner again and all of this stuff. And that goes for both sides, right? So like an influencer shouldn't really expect for a brand to give them $2,000 worth of products with nothing in return. So there's kind of like this game of cat and mouse, and it's similar to dating in the sense that like you really need to get to know that person and maintain them as you would a friend or as you would a journalist before you expect some kind of an output. Why would an influencer immediately post about your brand 2 minutes after learning it, 2 minutes about, after receiving the product? They probably wouldn't, because
Mhm.
they need to understand, what is the story? How can I incorporate this into my content? Is this a natural fit? All of that good stuff. And then you can kind of talk about, where can we go from here? If a brand doesn't have, budget and investment to do like a traditional paid influencer campaign at the moment, that's completely fine. But don't shut the door with the influencers that you've reached out to for an event or a mailer or something along those lines, because you might have budget in the future. Or they might reach out to you and be like, hey, I'm actually doing this giveaway as part of this other
Mhm.
kind of content series that I'm doing because I reached, I don't know, 100,000 followers last week, and I would love to include your product in it. Well, then that means that not only has this influencer grown and you got in on the ground floor and they thought of you, but now they're going to give you some content for free because it fits in with what their content strategy is. Another big part of this is like for larger personal milestones. So like the wedding business is huge on with influencers, because if they're throwing an engagement party and they need champagne, and they remember that they have a relationship with a champagne brand, they're going to reach out to that champagne brand first. And then suddenly you've got 2 cases of product sent out. So it wasn't nothing, but you're also showing up in this influencer's roundup posts and stories, and it feels more
Mhm.
authentic. And you may not have needed to pay anything except the product donation, but it was, something that was authentic to them versus you saying, I have $5,000, I can give that to you, and you must execute XYZ. So it's kind of like just making sure that from a relationship perspective, you meet these people where they are, try to get in on the ground floor when they're small, introduce yourself, get the
Mhm.
events and all of that going, but then stay in touch, or have your PR agency or your influencer freelancer or whoever it is stay in touch so that they're continually thinking about you and they're not just forgetting about you. So that in 2, 3, 4, 10 years down the road, when an opportunity does present itself, you have a good place to start. So yeah.
One thing that I've been hearing about that I think is really interesting is how much does the brand get to control the message versus how much do you let the influencer do what they want to do? Because I always feel like there's a little bit of a push pull where brands have a certain message that they want to portray, but the influencer says, "But you're reaching out to me for my audience
Mhm.
and my style." So tell me a little bit
Yeah.
about this.
Yeah, I think that this is very much the old school approach versus the new school approach. So, on the one
Okay.
hand, back when I started doing influencer marketing, it was very cut and dry. It was the brand creates the brief and sometimes submits like a mood board and all of these kinds of things. And then the influencer is expected to execute against that. Nowadays, I think it's a very, very different marketplace. And the reality is that when we're specifically talking about Instagram, I think is the best example of this. Instagram 5 or 6 years ago was somewhat easy to get a hold of. It was low competition, particularly in the food, wine, and spirits space. Lifestyle and fashion and beauty and those kinds of things have always been crowded marketplaces. But 5 or 6 years ago, there were only a handful of wine influencers, and anything that they posted was like automatic gold. Like it was very easy to get likes, comments, followers, all of those kinds of things. So it was a very low lift. Really, anything that a brand could say, hey, we have this new wine that we're releasing from the Bordeaux region, and we want you to do a post about it in this context, whatever. It would generally perform pretty well. Nowadays, unfortunately, that has changed because there are hundreds, if not thousands, of wine influencers now around the world, which is great. Welcome to the party. We love that. But on the other side, that means the competition on the algorithm is quite, quite high. And so when a brand creates a one size fits all brief, the reality is in execution, it doesn't fit anybody because it doesn't work with each individual influencer's, thrust and focus. A great example is like my personal page is very focused on wine education. And so when I'm kind of asked by a brand to do something that is maybe more lifestyle or doesn't really make sense for my page and isn't like high value, high educational content, it doesn't really perform that well. The brands that have worked the best with me are the ones that have said, we love your educational content. We're thinking we want you to do a 1-minute French wine lesson about this, brand that we're working on together. And that really, really does well for my page. But for someone else's page who maybe isn't a linguistic and like cultural French voice the way I am, would maybe be better with a lifestyle thing. Like, hey, I threw this beautiful backyard barbecue and I featured this wine brand as part of that with the pairings, and that performed really well for them. So I think, when I'm working with brands now and they ask me like, how should I create this influencer brief? Number one is I say, make sure you leave it open-ended. You definitely want to have your messaging in there for sure, like things that are non-negotiables for you. Like we want to describe the wine a certain way, or we only want to use certain types of glassware, or we need to make sure the label is present. Like very, very basic things like that are always fine to include. But when it comes to saying, there are some brands who have worked with me in the past and they've asked influencers to the T, they would create a storyboard for the influencer and say, 5 seconds in, you will do this. 10 seconds in, you will do this. 15 seconds in, you'll do this. And it never comes out the way that they're hoping. And yes, they get the content, but they don't get the reach, the engagement, the follows, or the link clicks. And that's ultimately where things, I think, in the influencer marketing space miss the mark. Because if your ultimate goal is to get people interested in talking about your brand, you can't treat influencers like they are working for your brand, because they're not. They're working for themselves. So, yeah.
That's a really key point. I think that's a really interesting thing that brands probably need to keep in mind. I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
And what is it about, tell me, maybe because I've been watching too much Mad Men again, like we're going through the series, but you see all the meetings and everyone is creative has, and the account people have to sign off on creative and all, and I mean, I guess, I mean, that still is like a very real thing in today's world, but how does that work in terms of, like, does the brand have to sign off on what the influencer content creator is coming back to? Do they have a little more, is it more carte blanche for the creator to kind of do what they want to do? Like, how does this, like, what should people expect?
Yeah, there's no one size fits all, I will say. I think the things that a good process and kind of like a rule of thumb to follow is like you as an internal marketing team, with or without an agency, with or without whoever else is working with you, have a discussion about like what you're looking for. What is your goal for this? And what does your budget look like? And then from there, you can kind of decide like, these are the types of influencers we want to go after because they're going to do well with reach. Or these are the types of influencers we want because they have proven like conversion. So they can really sell wine or they can really get link clicks, stuff like that. From there, when you go out to influencers, like I said, you should have like a generalized structure of the things that you want. So you want like an in-feed post with X amount of carousel slides. You want to do an Instagram story set with 3 individual frames. You want exclusivity from the specific region that you're talking about, or the specific wine or spirit that you're referring to, whether that's gin or bourbon or champagne or whatever. Those are the things that you should definitely keep in mind while you enter into the contract and the briefing process. After that, I always say, give it over to the influencers and have them think it over. And how do they think that this will perform best on their page? Because if they're open to a partnership, whether or not it's paid, that usually means that they've got interest in your product or in your brand. So that's a good sign that they're already, they're already feeling like there's something that I can do to make this brand successful. So I would say leave it open-ended to them. Make sure you follow up, obviously. But if they come back to you and they're like, hey, I have this cool idea and it's going to be, I'm going to let's say I'm throwing that lifestyle backyard barbecue. I'm going to need a little bit more wine than you originally proposed, but I think that this is going to perform well on my page. And here's like 2 examples of posts that are similar that have performed really well in the past. And if you as a brand are like, ugh, that doesn't really work for us, then that's still okay. Mm-hmm. It's a push-pull. I think influencers should be seen as a part of your creative approach. And you as the brand gatekeeper can always say, that doesn't really work for us. How about this instead? And then, oh my gosh, wait, hold on. I just lost not sure what happened there, but anyways, my computer decided to die for a hot minute.
Did some nice lighting right there.
I know. I don't know. I don't know what happened. But it's strange. But anyways, I'm here.
You're good. You're good.
Yeah. So where was I? I was talking about how influencers they're not a part of your team, but they're an extension of your marketing strategy. And so as long as there's like a push and pull and a respect of like, what works best on your page, but we want to know what that is in advance so that we can talk about it together and decide what's going to work best. And then I always say that after you've done that for however many influencers you're doing, make sure you do a postmortem with your team and you can invite the influencers to take part in that also. Like I've been a part of that for a few different brands as French wine tutor, where they've asked me like, how do you think it performed? And I can be like, well, I think that because of this limitation that you set through, maybe it didn't do as well as I wanted it to do, but I generally think that this was a positive thing, or get like some feedback even on email from influencers about how the process worked too, because if it's kind of a disorganized like mess, it's not going to be good for you or the influencer. And so you want to make sure that you're maintaining those relationships. As I was saying in the beginning, it's like dating. So if like you're not following up with someone after a date and you're like, oh, maybe it's because they hated the date and they didn't think it went really well. It's like, you don't know that until you ask that person, right? So like you have to text them or you have to email them, and you have to ask them, how do you think this went? And would you want to do it again type thing? So I think there's like a collaborative process that I always recommend people consider when they work with influencers, rather seeing it as a transactional service that someone's executing for you.
Mm-hmm. And I think kind of building on that, I want to definitely start getting into some strategy stuff, but I think an important thing that you're touching on is the idea of metrics. Can we talk a little bit about like what is a realistic expectation when it comes to metrics? How do you have these conversations? Because I know that that's always a little bit of a harder thing to kind of, at least it used to be, like proving your worth through metrics was a little bit harder, because how do you track if someone's buying it through an Instagram post? So tell me a little bit about this.
Yeah. And I will say wine and spirits have a very particular challenge where this is concerned, because we are not like consumer products that are available in all 50 states from the exact same retailer at the exact same time. And so one of the things that I think is challenging is that a lot of times wine and spirits marketers will hear about this amazing influencer program that a beauty brand did, and it made $800,000 worth of sales in 6 weeks or whatever. And they're upset with their influencer marketing team because they haven't been able to turn over the same amount of sales. And the reality is it's because we in the US do not have the infrastructure to do that at the same level. I'm not saying it's impossible, because I have actually run influencer programs that have driven revenue for wine and spirits brands successfully. But the approach has to be much more tailored and very, very specific. And so a good example was I did a program a few years ago for a client of mine, a gin client of mine, where we worked with a large food influencer who was American, but she spent at least 2 months in Italy, and it was an Italian gin. Every year, she spent at least 2 months in Italy, kind of like me going to France. And we partnered with her to create a cocktail kit. She created a recipe that was very easy with one of their gins that they were kind of having trouble selling through. And she created a recipe using that, and we worked with a third-party vendor, and that third-party vendor helped us source all the ingredients for her cocktail kit, pulled it together in a box, and had it with her branding as well as the brand's branding together. And we sold out of that kit. It was like 800 or something sales, which was wild because I think at the time she had about 400,000 followers, if I want to say. She got like, 6 figures of link clicks. She, was able to take a cut from the revenue of that. And it was generally a wildly successful thing. And she got other influencers in her sphere to purchase it because they're supporting her and she was well loved and well liked within her space also. So that kind of approach can really work. But if you're kind of going willy-nilly and you're saying like, oh, I want to do one influencer in California with 10,000 followers and one influencer in New York with 20,000 followers and one influencer in Chicago with 15,000 followers. And as a result of this investment, I expect to at least make up an ROI of 2.5 to 3 in the wine and spirit space without branding, without feeling like it's a bespoke program for each of the influencers. Unfortunately, you are going to be disappointed simply because our industry is not set up the way that you can give a bunch of influencers a Sephora code for beauty and they will promote the code as part of their weekly or monthly drops and you will sell out of that limited edition product within a couple of weeks. That's simply just not how consumers engage with wine and spirits in the same way. And I think the same can be said of certain food products and consumer goods that don't have the reach. So when it comes to KPIs, I always recommend really starting at the base of like, what do you want from your marketing in general? Is it, we want awareness. We want people to know that our product exists because we're in a crowded market space. And if that's the case, then it's like, go wide, do all the mailers to not just influencers, but also to press. Make sure you've got a couple events on the books, see what comes of those events and of those mailers. If people get back to you and they're like, hey, I actually really love this product. Do you have any budget to do anything? Because I feel like it would be really, really successful on my page. Then give that a go, give that a try. If your immediate thinking is like, okay, we really want to get high quality content that we can use on our own social channels, then maybe you go after what we were talking about before of the content creator route, someone who is maybe a really small page, but creates really, really high quality content. And that's not going to get you the reach or the engagement that you're looking for, but that person is going to create, let's say, 5 to 6 Instagram reels on an ongoing basis for your brand. And that's going to give you content for you to post that's an extension of your brand. So that's a goal in and of itself, because if you hire someone to create content for you in that sense of the word, you can boost the content, you can create a dark paid campaign for that, and then you control the metrics that you want. You control the reach, you control the engagement, you control the clicks and all of that stuff. If you're someone that's like, we really just need to sell, my first inkling is that an influencer campaign is not right for you if you're in the wine and spirits world. Because if you're really, really just like, I only see value in sales, and if they're not going to turn profit for me or purchase wine from me, then what is the point? Then you're not ready to work with an influencer. And that's okay, because someday you might be ready to work with an influencer, but don't use your budget to put towards that if you're already feeling like you're disappointed and writing influencers off. So I think that for wine and spirits, there are significant advantages to doing reach, engagement, and user-generated content campaigns, and potentially less of a benefit to doing sales-only campaigns. But if you're latching sales onto these other campaigns you're investing in, like I said, that have that personalized element for the influencer, and you're willing to go all in and create something that really speaks to their audience, like I said, with the kits that I created, then that's something that can really work. But if you're just seeing it as a one-off desperate play to get sales, it's not going to work for you. So yeah.
Interesting. And let's let's talk a little bit more about strategy, because we were some of our preliminary conversations as we were talking about, like, what is a good social media strategy? Like, what are trends? Like, what are interesting things people can do? And like, is it important to even be grabbing onto trends, or should you just is there a guidebook? I mean, just throw it out at me. Just give it all. Give it all to me.
Yes, definitely. I mean, like, look, the reality is that there is power in tapping into a trend, but not every trend is going to be for your brand, and not every trend is going to resonate. And if you're seeing a trend all over your feed, it's too late. It's too late. Don't tap into it because everyone else is already doing it. The feed's oversaturated. Engagement is tanking. If you see another influencer or another brand doing something that you've never done before or that you've never seen before, and you're like, hey, wait a minute, actually, that might work. Jump on it. That's the type of thing that you should be jumping on. But if you're seeing, like right now, there's a big one that's going on around my page. It's like reasons to follow or unfollow me. This is like a big trend. And people post like one photo and it will say like all the things that makes them or their brand what they are. But it's literally my entire feed today. And I'm like, there's no way. If I jump on this trend, no one is going to see my content. No one's going to like it because it's old hat. It's already retired. Like it's done. But if I'm scrolling through like my Explore tab or my Reels tab, and I'm like, wait a minute, I actually think that this one is really funny and I could make it into mine and nobody else in my niche is posting about this, then I give it a try. And I'm like, okay, actually, this is going to function really well. And it's been interesting because in the past 6 months alone, I've done that 4 or 5 times on French Wine Tutor kind of as a test. And those are the posts that have performed the best and brought me the most people. It wasn't what everyone else in my niche was doing. It was what somebody else happened to do that worked really well in their niche that I was then able to, add to the wine space. So I would say like, there is value in jumping onto trends, but you can't rely on trends for your entire strategy. Just like you can't always say, we only use trending audio, because sometimes it doesn't really matter. If your content is good enough aside from the audio, then that's important. And that works. And also, if you are a corporate brand, you can't use trending audio because it's not royalty free. And so you will get sued by Instagram. So there's no like one size fits all for all of this. And I think, the same can be said of AI. I know we were talking about this before we jumped on the call. I have strong opinions generally about AI and that I basically hate it. I think that there's a lot of bad AI generated content, and a lot of people are using it now to generate their captions and their comments and all of that stuff. And it really makes me sad because I ultimately do feel like social media is an extension of humanity and human art and human creativity and human connection, kind of similar to the way that I see wine and language. And so to see people outsource creation to a third party to save them time, people can tell immediately when it's an AI generated image because it doesn't have your mark on it and it's not interesting because everyone else is doing it. So you have to kind of see your brand or your individual page as a brand. And when you do that, you have to invest in brand identity. What are the fonts? What are the colors? What are the logos? All of that stuff. And then from there, that's really your playbook. And you can create like, okay, this trend works for me. Or actually, this AI generated thing is really funny. And I think that I can make it work in my brand colors or make it more specific or build something off of it that will work for my brand in addition to my ongoing content strategy and brand identity that I have.
Got it. And what about platforms? Like should a person/brand, should they be sticking to one platform? Should they be diversifying? How much presence should you have across the social media spectrum?
This is a really good question. And I forgot for a minute that you were a journalist because I was like, well, she's asking so many good questions. Oh, right. She's a writer. She does this for a living. But yeah, I think this is a double-edged sword because on the one hand, I always recommend that people are on more than one platform because Instagram could disappear tomorrow. Like whether that's because they go bankrupt or because the federal government or the EU shuts them down completely. They're kind of a wild, wild west and you could lose your following at any time. So I can kind of see both ways. On the one hand, I would definitely make sure you have something that's ownable. So your website, for example, you own that, or something along those lines. That's like, whether that's like a book or some kind of other physical product that you fully own yourself. So that worst case scenario, everything gets shut down tomorrow and your web hosting server is still there. So you can still create content there. So I always say that, make sure you have kind of like a backup plan that you feel like expresses your brand. but also make sure that you don't stretch yourself too thin, because a lot of times what I see brands doing is they're like, oh my gosh, this happened like 4 or 5 years ago. There was this big push for everybody to join TikTok in the wine and spirit space, because they had introduced new legislation and new age gating techniques. And everybody was like, oh, our time has come. We have to be on TikTok. And the reality was that like nobody could really execute TikTok well, because it requires a completely different content strategy. It requires a completely different posting cadence, a totally different aesthetic, and nobody was ready for it. And so there were very few wine and spirits brands that were able to really build momentum on that platform, because they really didn't know how to behave. And they also didn't have time from their internal teams to execute against that world and what it required. So I always say, like, at the end of the year, I said this with the influencer stuff as well, but I highly recommend postmortems. You can never go wrong with like an end of year meeting of like, what did we do on social this year? How did that function? Do we think that we have the bandwidth or the budget to add on an additional platform? Is there a platform that's existing that we're not posting on that we can easily cross-post content to and it will perform? I worked with a client who was really strong in Instagram and the wine space. And they were like, you know what? We're hearing all of this like information about YouTube Shorts. We really want to just like take our Instagram Reels and paste them onto YouTube Shorts and see if it works. That's a great example of what to do, because YouTube Shorts is a pretty low lift. It takes the exact same content format. You can use the exact same royalty-free music that you created for Instagram and see, with longer captions, with a little bit of an SEO tweak, you can make it work. And test it out. But if you get there and you test it out and it doesn't come to fruition, or you're not growing, then stop investing in it and try something else. So it's really like a test and learn. I would say make sure you have an owned channel as number one. So have a website or something. Then have a major channel, which right now I would say for the majority of brands that I work with, that is still Instagram, which is king. And then have like a secondary channel that you're either trying to build for or have built in the past and aren't investing time in, but you still have, a big following there. A really good example of that is Facebook. 10 years ago, Instagram was a baby and everybody was on Facebook. Everybody was doing Facebook ads. Facebook pages were this, that, the other thing. Even influencers are huge on Facebook, which is like impossible to believe, because like I don't log into Facebook for myself anymore at all. But it was the big cheese at the time. And so there's a lot of brands that like have hundreds of thousands of followers on Facebook. And they're like, we don't want to sacrifice what we've built in the past, but we know that it's not our main growth platform. So what they do is they just cross post from their main platform, if that's Instagram, onto Facebook. And it's not all their posts. It's not every time. It's just when there's a big announcement or there's a big event or something that they really want to share with those followers. And they make sure that they tweak, again, the caption a little bit, maybe the way the image carousel shows up a little bit so that it works, but you're not putting a huge lift onto it. So.
Okay. And let's talk a little bit about type of content, because I know that there's a lot of buzz about video really performing well, but there is obviously photos and other aspects. So tell me about types of content that people can and should be posting.
All of it. That's an easy question. No, I would say this goes back to a recurring theme for this chat, which has really been test and learn. In my time being an influencer and also running brand pages, there have been months and even years where I'm noticing that photo content performs so much better than any of the other video content that I posted that month or that quarter or even that year. And then it'll change all of a sudden. So you kind of have to, this is where reporting and analytics come into play. And I always recommend for my clients, whether I'm managing their social or their strategy, or they have somebody in-house doing it, I will create a template of that reporting and analytics so that at the end of every month, they can very clearly see what worked and what didn't and why. Did it work because it was a bad photo, but a funny trend and it was just like a one-off? Or are you seeing patterns where, hey, this month actually our reels are performing really well versus our carousels. So maybe next month we try to invest a little bit more in those reels and we post less carousels. Now, if that backfires and the next month you're like, ooh, that strategy didn't actually work, then that's fine because it's social media. You can delete posts, you can hide likes, you can rejigger and redo things as you need to. It's not that serious. We're not curing cancer, and so you can change and adapt as you need. And so maybe it is like you decide, hey, you know what? We are actually doing really well because 50% of our content is carousel posts, 50% of our content is reels post, and then we do like a smattering of stories. Maybe that works for them. On the other hand, there are other brands who like really are great at carousels. They have these gorgeous, high-end photography. They're great at telling stories that way. They have really good graphic templates with a beautiful font that people enjoy and relate to. And that works for them. And then there's other big brands that are like, we just like to be silly and unhinged, and we only do ridiculous reels.
Yeah.
And that's what they
Right,
do.
right.
But I think like this goes back to like test and learn, optimization and reporting. Like, don't be afraid to go into your account. If you have an Instagram or a Facebook account, also if you have a YouTube, Threads, or Substack, all of these, and TikTok, all these platforms have their own analytics platforms. So you don't have to purchase like an external analytics platform, or get a subscription.
Okay.
I do recommend that if you're looking to professionalize it, you look into some kind of, sort of low key scheduling and analytics platform that you can get some of those for like $5 to $10 a month, only because that will help visualize all of the analytics. And if you're like me, I'm a super visual person. So sometimes when I go into the back end of Meta and I'm like, oh my God, this is so many numbers. Like I just need a visual representation first to create some graphs. So that's helpful. But everybody has access to the same tools as long as you're a business or creator account on all of those platforms. And so you can do this as an exercise yourself month over month and be like, why did that, Substack post perform? Interesting. Maybe my, readers want to have more long form content, or maybe it's on YouTube. My shorts didn't really perform. I wonder why, because this long form video did, so it's really like a question of like, don't be afraid of metrics, of exploration and seeing and adapting, because the platforms are constantly evolving and there is no one size fits all.
For those that aren't familiar, as an individual, what's the benefit of having a creator account?
It's access to those analytics. That is the biggest thing that I would say. Instagram is also introducing these like new creator marketplaces that they're saying, where they're saying that brands will be able to go in and be able to search all of the people that have creators. And it sounds like they're kind of like building almost like an influencer marketing tool. I have not seen that tool myself, but I have on French Wine Tutor, because that is a creator account. I have been able to see like, we're recommending you and your toolkit on the creator marketplace. I'll be like, that's interesting. I haven't seen the creator marketplace on Meta yet, but maybe I need to log out and log back into my professional account on Meta to see. But yeah, there's definitely that. And it's also, if you're a creator account, you can use trending audio without needing to have it be royalty free. So that is another core difference between a creator account and a business account. A business account represents, a more professionalized business that maybe can't hop on trends as well, and also should be purchasing their own music. The thinking is that you should always pay artists, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you're a larger corporation, you should be responsible for your music. And Meta has a very large library of royalty-free music, and so does TikTok. So the thinking is that it's kind of like those three tiers. If you have a personal account, you don't need analytics. If you have a creator account, you do need analytics, but you also need access to those like fun music and all of that stuff that, regular accounts would have. And if you're a business account, it's like, we want you to spend money on Instagram and we want you to pay for additional things. So they give you analytics. They also supposedly give you access to this creator marketplace, but you have to use royalty-free music. So.
Got it. Kind of taking a really quick step, like in the opposite direction, say for a brand or somebody who's kind of just getting started with this, really starting to take it seriously, what are like your top 3 tips for them that you would offer for someone who is really just getting their feet wet into this whole, like taking this seriously?
Yeah, I would say start with an audit. So go through all of your past content that you've created and take a hard look at what performed and what didn't, because that's going to inform what you should be doing in the future. If there's certain topics that perform really well, if there's certain content types that perform really well. The other thing I say is, who do you consider your competitor? You should have at least 3 or 4 identified and look at what they're doing. And I always say that if you're a brand, or really if you're a creator, your competitors aren't people who are necessarily the same that you're competing for shelf space against. On social media, it's the people who are crushing it on social, the people who have way more followers than you do, but not so much that they're like, millions of followers. If you only have 10,000 followers, someone with 2 million followers is not your competitor. So I always say, like, try to start and do like a tiered system of competition. So you have maybe someone that's 2 times your following, someone that's 2.5, someone that's 3, someone that's 5. Mm-hmm. And you can see, how did they build their brand? What are they currently posting about? How are they pushing their products? What are the influencer campaigns or brand marketing campaigns that they're doing? Are they doing events? All of these kinds of things kind of ladder up into that social media and competitor audit. And that's like a baseline. It'll tell you, where you should be going in the space. And if people who are currently following you are following those accounts, then you can see the types of content that they're interacting with and why they like to interact with it right off the bat. Mm-hmm. So I always say start there, and then you can go up from there.
Got it. Interesting. Tell me a little bit about the idea of community building, because that's really important with any social media. Paying attention to the comment section, engaging with followers. I mean, Substack, it's a really huge part of, I think, what makes this platform so dynamic. Yeah. But tell me a little bit about, because but doing that can also be a hellscape. I mean, and especially if you're getting negative comments or someone is, biting back at you. Tell me about this community management component of all of this.
Yeah, I think this is one of the most underrated parts of social media because it can be enormously powerful. I think community management as a brand is also not just about people who are commenting on your posts or messaging you. It's also engaging with the people that you follow. There are brands out there who only still follow like 10 people. And I think that's a massive mistake, because how can you really grow your following if nobody sees you? It's important. There is a lot of value in curating a feed as a corporate brand, following those people, and then going to that homepage on Instagram or Substack or TikTok, wherever it is, and engaging with those people, liking their posts, commenting on their posts, being like, hey, I saw that. That's really funny. And as I was saying before, that can also help you to identify good people to engage with for brand partnerships, if it's a like-minded brand, or an influencer for an influencer campaign. That's how you can really stay on top of all of that. So that's one of the major things that I recommend. From the commenting side of things, I'm really passionate about liking and replying to all comments. I do this all the time on my page, unless I'm really overwhelmed and there's a lot. But most of the time, I will say I reply to all of them, and I take a look at who comments, and I make sure that I go back and I reciprocate. And I can't do it every single time. And I can't do it for every single post, especially if that person is posting once a day. I'm going to get lost in all of those posts that I need to go like. But I always try to return the favor. And as someone who sees their page as a community, I really do see French Wine Tutor as a community. I want to make sure that other people know that I see their posts. I love their posts. I like them as a creator and a person. And so I have a list of people that I make sure I go through and I comment and I like on all of their posts. That's because awesome. I admire them, because I think they're cool and they're posting interesting content. And then I go to my feed and make sure that I like and comment to the people that I follow, generally speaking, as well. I think for a brand, when it comes to negative comments, it can get very hairy very fast. So I always recommend that one of the things you do when you create a social media strategy is creating a community response library. So that is something where you pull together both positive, neutral, and negative comments that people could potentially make about your brand, about your products, about the people representing your brand and products. And you discuss discuss as a marketing team how we want to respond to this in advance. Now, not everything is going to be one size fits all, but let's say I don't know, you have you're an importer and there's a certain stock of your wines or whatever that ended up getting corked. And you know about this in advance because the producers told you and they're like, I'm so sorry, but like, this is horrible. And like, this is happening. And then you get a bunch of comments that are like, this is a corked wine. I hate this wine, blah, blah, blah. It tasted like dirt, like whatever the comment comes through.
Yeah.
If you have this community response library decided upon in advance, then nobody's going crazy and running around with a chicken with their head cut off being like, oh my God, I don't know how to respond to this. What do we say? What do we say? What do we say? Because in that community response library, you have all of the approaches and tones that you might use for a situation like that. And sometimes if like a crisis happens and, there's something really horrible that's happening with your brand or with a founder or with something like that, turn off the comments for a hot minute and just wait for things to settle down and resolve. And that is something that you can do. And you can turn them back on after the crisis has passed. And that's really like in a very extreme circumstance because you don't want to lose your connection with your community. But at the same time, there is a trend right now going on where if people hear that something negative is coming on with a brand, then they will tell all their friends and they'll all get into this like little bot circle of like, let's go negatively comment on all the brands thing. And that unfortunately is real. And I have seen that happen in real time. And if that's the case, these people are not really following you anyway. They're not your core consumers. So don't give them the opportunity to, make this negative kind of cycle continue to go on. But generally, like, I think that comments are really powerful because they'll show you who's really engaged in your brand. And a lot of people will ask questions about your brand in the comments. And you want to make sure you reply to those questions and be transparent and honest. And if you can't be transparent and honest, or if you want them to kind of talk a little bit more about why they have this question or whatever, you can always DM them. Be like, hey, I sent you a DM. Definitely want to chat about this further. Something like that can be really powerful because then other people see it and they're like, interesting. That's a little tea that they didn't respond directly to that person in the comments, but that they're willing to open up and have a conversation about it. And that is a little bit more than what a lot of brands do. I think the biggest mistake that you can make in a social media strategy is setting your post schedule and forgetting about it, and then not logging in once that post has gone live. Or after you post it, you just post it and then you log out or you close the tab or you go do other things for work. What you need to be doing is you post it, you make sure you're engaging with your community, that you respond to all of the comments, as many as you feel make sense for your brand, and that you have a library and response system of how your brand shows up in comments and in that way.
Wow. That's a really great tip. I think that's a very smart, proactive approach right there. That's great.
Yeah.
I have a very selfish question for you. So what do you do if you don't contrary to like doing these Substack lives and everything, I'm not super great about the face forward, filming a video of myself walking down the street talking. Like, what do you do? Like, how do you create content if you're not really comfortable being in front of the camera? Like, how do you create these compelling content? Are there any tips, any tricks?
Jana,
that doesn't have to be like your face.
No.
Like this.
I'm just kidding.
I look at it and I'm like, oh God.
Get over it. You're beautiful. We love you. No, I'm just kidding somewhat. I think that there.
Oh, you're kidding about me being beautiful.
No, not that part. No. But you know what I meant. No, I mean, like, look, the reality is that people like to see people. And especially when you're talking about a larger brand, if all you do is post bottle shots of your spirit or of your wine, boring. Like, come on, I need to see the people that make it. Who are the people in charge of it? Who's your marketing team? Who's your winemaker? Who's your master distiller? Like, show me the people behind it. And it doesn't have to be a long form, formal interview with talking points. Oftentimes that doesn't work anyway. So what is the point of doing it? You should make sure that you're showcasing, if you're a brand, a certain type of person or a certain group of people in a way that is comfortable for them. And that's different for everybody. For some brands, it's just like a fun little reel where they pass the mic and they're like, what did you do today? And each individual person says like a silly thing that they did that was part of their job description. Or maybe it's just like a post about like, what's your favorite wine and food pairing? What was your favorite restaurant you went to recently? Like simple things like that can be really, really effective because it does show the human side of your brand. As an individual, I still think there is value in showing up and showing your face on camera. But I hear you, and I'm actually not a huge fan of doing a lot of the talking videos. I really have to hype myself up. It is not a natural thing for me. My way around it is I do like twice yearly when I'm traveling to France. I do these like larger photo shoots with a professional photographer because I know they're going to capture me well. And I invest in that. And then I reuse those photos for my carousels as my cover photos, things like that. So that's just my personal thing that I do. But I also still like show up sometimes in like content. And I think honestly, you just need to find a format where you feel comfortable because not every format is going to feel comfortable for you. Maybe it's not, you're in a public place, you're like walking around and you're like smiling and touching your hair. You know, that's not it for you. Maybe it isn't, you know, walking around with your mic and being like, I'm outside and I'm going to this restaurant. You know, that was really hard for me. I just did a series on Restaurant Week and I was like, I hate this. I look terrible. I'm never doing this again. And it didn't perform. So it also showed me my audience didn't like that either. Right. So I think like you just have to kind of like see and experiment. Like you don't have to be fully comfortable in front of a camera, but maybe it's just like you're holding a glass in a beautiful setting, like hand in glass as a photo can work, but you're still in the photo. There's a human element because your hand is in the photo, right? So there's things like that where it doesn't necessarily have to be your face, but you do have to make it so that it couldn't be AI. You know, it's you. And I think that's another part of what's important for wine, spirits, hospitality in general is that in this age of AI, what are we all promoting? We're promoting the human experience, generally speaking. And so that means that in our content, we should probably be showing the human experience and the human behind the experience.
I hear that a lot, that, you know, it is that pushback against AI, and it is to make sure that you're promoting something that is authentic, is to show the flaws, to show the little bloopers sometimes is totally fine. Right. I get that. And that makes perfect sense to me. I think that it's just something that, and when I think about that and just reinforcing that message, I think it makes it a lot easier to think about the types of content that could potentially get put out there that people don't necessarily want nor need perfection.
No.
So that's definitely a great point.
They don't. And I think like there's definitely a trend right now in social media to be less curated, to be a little bit more off the cuff, to be silly, to post bloopers. Like I posted a blooper reel last year and I was like, this is going to do terrible. Nobody's going to like this. And it was like one of my top performing posts of that month. And I was like, how is this possible? I hated this. But people like to see that like, you're a human being too. And like you make mistakes and you do things that are silly. So yeah.
Right. We're actually a little over time, but I do have one more question I think people would probably want to know. Actually, two questions. The first is, are there any tools, are there any apps, programs that you like to help create social media?
Yes. I am a big believer in Canva, huge believer in Canva. I've been a Canva Pro account holder for like since Canva existed effectively. So I've really grown up with that. And it's just easy. Like it's never going to replace a real graphic designer to do your logo or your brand identity. I always recommend, again, working with a human. But at the same time, it's a great place you can now on Canva Pro, you can like insert your brand colors and your logos and your fonts and all of those things so that when you go to create that content on social, all that stuff is there for you immediately. You don't have to worry about it. And it's just in the bank and you can just execute against that. So I always recommend Canva. I also recommend a video editing app that is the native video editing app for the platform that is your main platform. So for me, that's the Edits app for Instagram. That's the one that I use and it's free. And the reason I do that is because the exporting works better, the fonts load better. I can jigger the video quality and all of that kind of stuff. And I don't have to pay for it. It's currently free. CapCut is good if you're doing TikTok as your main point of view. But one of my big things with CapCut is that you really have to pay for it if you want like the nice fonts and all that stuff, which I personally find annoying. So I'm not a huge CapCut person, but people really love it. So those are the two ones. And then also, like I said, if you are really serious about taking your social media to the next level, I do recommend a account with a scheduling and analytics profile, like a Later or a Planoly, Hey Orca, something that connects to your Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, whatever it might be. And you can schedule that in advance. You can see the grid in advance. That's really helpful for approvals too. If your brand needs to have all of its content approved by your head of marketing, by your CEO, it's just easier for them to see it in one place. So you're not doing it in a Word document or a spreadsheet or whatever. And there are free versions, but then there are also like $10 a month versions. So it's an affordable solution.
That's great. If people wanted to work with you, where can they find you? How can they get in touch with you?
Yes. So my website is thestrategyseller.com. You can reach out to me at katie@thestrategyseller.com as well. And just send me a note and we can set up a call and chat about what you're looking for. So yeah.
Awesome. Katie, thank you so much. This has been so much great information. I learned so much and I'm really excited to take some of this away and
Yay.
play around with some of it because I think that, there's some great takeaways in here. But thank you again for coming on, for sharing your knowledge, and I can't wait to see you in person really soon.
I know. I hope so. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun. And I'm here anytime anyone wants to geek out about social media stuff.
Amazing. Take care.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye.